I hear.
Yeah, I'm gonna start recording, bruh. But yeah, it's cool. I cut out anything that maybe not want to go in, but I'm gonna go ahead and throw it on just in case I don't miss anything. But yeah,
Sure, yeah.
it's definitely rainy down here. Hurricane Sally came up and dumped about 12 inches of rain or something. So, but other than that, man, it's yeah, it's pretty good.
I got a conspiracy theory on that, but we'll get to it.
Hurricane Sally,
Yeah,
the hell? You
yeah,
think they're like creating the hurricanes?
something like that.
All right, we don't have to get into that. But yeah, so it's good to see you, man. As always, I
You,
appreciate
brother.
the line you dropped me. It was pretty good,
You
and
like
get
that?
that shit out of your system, I guess, before we actually do something entertaining, semi-entertaining.
That was the idea.
So yeah, man. Basically, what I want to do is I'm gonna give a little background. Me and Thomas have gone back for years and years and years. Ever since we were like, two, maybe three.
Yeah.
Known each other and shared common interest. Pretty much family. You're like my third step cousin, twice removed or something. But I always considered you cousin. So we grew up with similar interests in geekdom. So we were kind of the black sheeps in our family
Oh
as
yeah.
to that. So we grew up in a very country atmosphere. A lot of people were hunting, fishing, outdoorsmen, and here me and Thomas are, talking about superheroes and flying around and writing our own stories and things like that. So we were definitely different in that sense. We more were into video games and indoors than outdoors and doing all that stuff. Not that we didn't like to
Yeah,
go.
before it was cool, when it was still scrutinized, when you still got like your ass handed to you for it.
Exactly, and that's what we're going right into it. That was one of my things was going to discuss with you was the fact that back in the day, like it was scrutinization, and even The Simpsons. You go back and watch the '90s. It's always making fun of the comic book nerds and the people who like comic books and things like that. But back in the day, it wasn't cool. Like it was just you're a geek and you go sit in your corner, all that kind of stuff, and read your comics, like it was very it wasn't the coolest thing. It was nerdy, it was geeky. But as the years have progressed, obviously we've had the advent of Marvel movies, and the Marvel movies have made geekdom mainstream. Like it's not just Marvel movies, but you have these stories that have kind of happened on the big screen. Robert Downey Jr. brought Iron Man to life fantastically. And these things have happened. And everybody's like, Marvel, 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 yay, and everybody's just in a frenzy about comic books. Black Panther, unfortunately, the guy who played him was Chadwick. He just passed away. And it was a big deal. Back in the day for comic book movies, for us, we had like Howard the Duck and terribly done Spider-Man, and there was Superman. Superman was okay because you had Christopher Reeve and that kind of thing, pretty high budget. But the comic book movies back in the day were nothing like the comics. They kind of put a little bit of this element in, but it was more Hollywood, fluff, more love stories, things like that. Lois Lane. The villains were just weird, weirdly the three guys from Krypton. I forget their names, but they wore the black like the gothic.
Criminals. Yeah. Right.
The criminals, but they wore the black like the gothic. Kind of trend at the time, and that was what was cool at the time. It was kind of like the grunge, dark, vampire type thing.
Beginnings of that, before that got cool.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And growing up in that atmosphere, I mean, you and we collected comic books, so we actually had comic book collections. and things like that. And really what we were seeing portrayed had, it was nothing like the comic books. And dare I say today, a lot of the stories are adapted from actual stories from comics now, but they still don't, hold a candle to really, it's basically like reading the book or watching the movie, like, how people have the novels where
Two different experiences.
Right. Where you're reading a novel, like maybe Harry Potter, for example, you're reading the novel, but some people say that the book's better than the movie. So that's how I am with the comic movies. Like, I am not super into them. I'm like, I know about the Infinity God.
I'm not either.
I've heard this story 100 times already. They did the story in the animated series in the 90s, and it was better.
Yeah, much better.
They did it great in the cartoons. So that's where I am as far as comics, cool geekdom, and kind of where it was evolved from. The comic books too that I would obtain, like I was saying, the stories would be a lot better to me than what they throw out there. It seems like they're throwing out
nonsense
pieces. Well, yeah. It's like bits and pieces of what it was, and all of it kind of has a formula to it for the big screen. So it's kind of like
it's too much, and that's not what it's about at all.
Right. Yeah. And you had like 100,000 comics, and we would trade, and I would get Wizard magazine, so I would try to keep up with storylines with all the things. But I had a couple favorites that were never, and I hope someday that they're done justice. But one of my favorite comics was The Mask by who did that? Oh man,
I don't even know.
I can't remember now, but I used to really like them. But you had the Jim Carrey movie in the 90s, which I saw when I was in the theaters when I was like.
Much different than the comics you used to have, dude. You had the coolest Mask comics, and they were so much better than the movie.
Yeah, and that's kind of what did.
I read them all the time. Every time I came to visit, we'd break them out and look through them. I did. I couldn't find nothing like that, and you like spurred me up because I'm like, I gotta find something at least this cool to show him. That became my thing. I gotta find something so cool. It at least like will get him going, measures up, competes, like contends. And that's what I always try to do when I bring comics to show you, was stuff that I'd never seen before, couldn't get anywhere else, and here we are with it.
Exactly. The Mask. So I saw this movie on the big screen. It had Jim Carrey. It was slapstick comedy. It was alrighty then, and it was Jim Carrey, and he's great, and I've always enjoyed him. But and it was before I read the comics, so I really enjoyed the movie as a kid too. I'm like, wow, this is cool. A guy puts on a mask, he becomes somebody different, kind of superhuman, can do all these weird things. It's a cool concept, and but I didn't know it was based on this graphic novel. So when it was on a whim, I'm like, oh, cool, I like the Mask, I like the movie, so I'm going to get the graphic novel. So I got the graphic novel, started reading it, and I'm like, this is nothing like the movie. There was more extreme violence. There was it was darker, just to put it simply. It was a lot darker than the movie was. And the Stanley Ipkiss, Jim Carrey's character, dies within the first few pages. And I was like, what the hell? I didn't understand. And it really followed Lieutenant Dan Calloway, who was like the detective who was after the Mask the whole series. Yeah. So it kind of followed him in those in the rest of the story. And man, I was blown away by it. And I'm like, why are they putting that on the screen instead of this? Because they can now, you can do a Netflix series with it easily, and it would be really popular if they just put it as dark as it was. Because comic book series have gotten accepted for being adult and dark and gritty. Batman had a ways to go. Tim Burton was revolutionary when he came out with the '89 Batman.
Is that the only thing we're supposed to do with that though?
The only thing we're supposed to do is like put it in the movies.
No, I mean like a philosophical question. Yeah, you got mature when you got dark and gritty, but there's more to being mature than dark and gritty.
Oh, sure.
Is that all we were supposed to do with that?
Just in the general sense, just like, and the fact that it's no longer the 60s Batman, it's no longer like, hey, Robin, let's do the Batman. And like, like the very campiness of superheroes that it was back in the day. They comics grew up. I think they grew up with us, sort of, or at least the stories did. But I feel like they still haven't caught up. This is kind of the point. I feel like they haven't caught up with comics. Like the comics, you're not still the true like heart of the comics translated to the big. Yeah,
correct.
That's what I'm saying, pretty much. You got movies that are you got one-offs that are like, all right, that was good. But I hate, dude, X-Men.
Hancock.
The first one, I hated it. I watched it. I'm like, this is fucking garbage. Like, I hated the first X-Men movie. Now they did get progressively better as they went on, and Hugh Jackman.
Still not the comics.
Hugh Jackman did a good job later on, as he got into that character and he really kind of developed it. But Wolverine was a hairy, short guy with claws. He wasn't Hugh Jackman. Too. On the casting side. I'm ranting. And
in the 90s, they wanted Danzig for that role.
No, really?
Yeah, they wanted Glenn Danzig for that role in the 90s.
Mother.
And Wizard Magazine put that one out, and they wanted Clint Eastwood for Cable, and they wanted like the girl that was in True Lies with Schwarzenegger. They wanted her for Katana.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
No. The assassin, the spy. They wanted her for Psylocke.
Oh.
Yeah, and then they wanted Nicole Kidman for Jean Grey. Yeah, this was like 90s Wizard projections in them old magazines.
Yeah, those projections for those movies were funny. But they did get Professor Xavier correct. Like Professor Xavier, and I don't think anybody else could play him like Jean-Luc Picard, Mr. Patrick Stewart, which I did at with Comic-Con, not Comic-Con. I went to a Dragon Con. I was able to do a panel with him. I saw him. I was about 10 feet away from Professor X, so that was cool.
Nice.
Got to see him, and it was really cool. It was a Star Trek panel, so it had him and Gates McFadden, who was Beverly Crusher on Next Generation.
Oh, right on.
And one of the Voyager people. I don't remember. It was the Asian guy on Voyager.
Right.
Ensign Kim.
Yeah.
I forget his real name, but he was. They were all good. It was a fun time. But yeah, man, comics. They weren't cool. Like we weren't cool people as kids.
Nope.
But then we went as far as to try to kind of write our own stories, and we've done that before as well. We've had our own kind of things that we've done. You had a story published in like a high school newspaper, and I just did my own kind of. I self-published.
Yeah, and yours were better than mine.
Yeah. But my passion was always more writing than it was for.
Dude, you were video games all the way too.
Oh yeah, I still am, man.
Yeah.
I still like a good video game that comes out and go back and play the classics.
Right.
The video games too. I mean, back then, kind of same deal. It wasn't as big as other things. People are playing, like I was playing Final Fantasy VII, Wild Arms, these JRPGs.
Yeah, right there with you. You're
Yeah,
who I learned to play that from, by the way. I wouldn't have been able to score in that at all if it hadn't been for you. You showed me how it worked, the mechanics and the physics of the gameplay, and I
yeah,
didn't understand it. You got me there so I could play it.
yeah. No, I mean,
Taught me how to play.
very kind of complex things, you know, and storylines coming from, you know, the graphics just being little polygons, you know, at that time,
Yeah.
and
And the
nothing,
digital technology, it was still analog.
yeah, nothing to write home about. And but the story, what it was back then, is and the reason that they're still classics today is the storyline had to be on par or maybe even better than
Yeah.
the graphics, because if you didn't have that storyline to go off of, man, you're screwed. And the gameplay.
The difference between the stage and a movie, because the stage requires and relies upon the imagination of the audience to make up for the special effects. And it creates a separate reality when you're sitting there listening to a play and watching actors perform live. That's the difference between the old school games and the new ones, the comics and the movies, the difference between that play and a movie. Yeah, you big time, you had to buy in with yourself and buy into this narrative.
Yeah, 100%. Um, yeah, you didn't have the flash in the pan,
No, hell no.
and the graphics to fall back on. But you know,
But even they had their own art about them.
right. Yeah, I'm complaining, but you know, you go back 20 more years, and you know, it was even worse. You know.
Yeah, it's Pong. Pong's what you got.
Yeah, even
Yeah,
from then. So us growing up, we got to see this kind of revolution and progression of art in video games and in comics and everything. I guess that's what I'm talking about. It's a progression, and I guess
you
it's
know, all the video game was a digital comic book anyway to begin
yeah,
with.
yeah, pretty much. And they even would have comic book games, you know, even from the very inception of video games, you know, you started seeing these comic games come around. Batman was a very early one. You had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES, on the original.
Yeah, that one was one of the best, and an arcade.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
arcade one was jam.
Turtles in Time, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, man. Those were like, yeah, they were good. And it was another way for them to bring their art and medium to a different place or a different platform.
right.
So yeah, it was yeah, they translated well to video games, and the video game revolution kind of began, you know, with the NES. But as graphic and everything got better, they started to, you know, progress, and you can do a lot different things. In some ways, it takes away from the storytelling and the gameplay when you are have all these like graphics, and it's not as simple.
Correct.
Because a lot of people are spending more time on how the game looks, you know, and how it's
Correct. And less on the substance, no depth, and all you've got is something superficial. How long are you going to be able to ride that before it's not doing anything for you anymore?
right. And there's exceptions to that too. There are games that have really did some pretty exceptional writing and kind of were like, this is what we're going to be good at instead of the other way. But it's just everybody, and this is kind of going back to a conversation I've had. It's like it's really easy for a lot of people to put creative content out. You know, you have free markets and free things. You know, you can put your own video games out now. You know, you can create your own if you have the know-how. I wouldn't even know how to get started on something like that.
Mario Maker for real all day long.
I mean, yeah, and people have made these insane levels that are, it's like, this guy made this, and everybody's like, oh, wow, and they're like the only one that can beat it.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, it's pretty exceptional what can be done in nowadays in time. The limitations too, when we were kids, I was talking about, analog video handheld cameras to make videos, like we didn't have the internet. We didn't have, now I'm sounding like the old guy. Back in my day, I didn't have all this, but, we didn't have the internet or cell phones or a camera that we took around. And a lot of times we take this shit for granted too. We take it, I got a camera right here that I could make a whole documentary movie with. And, I'm just sitting around in my underwear eating Cheetos, like I could literally be doing something with just my cell phone.
That's what I did with mine when I got out of the service. I started video diary, documenting, writing all this stuff to like capture that time. And I made it like a comic.
Nice.
In its ways. I made it like a lot of things in its way, but I guess you'd have to be me to know. Just like you'd have to be you to know how you've done it for yourself.
Sure. With that said, that's a little background. Kind of got on a soapbox, but I was really, as a kid, I know you had a lot of different comics, and there was a lot of series that you introduced me to that I really enjoyed. You'd be like, here, Brandon, read this stack and then come see me later.
Yeah, no kidding.
You literally did it. I remember you doing that. You're like, here's a stack of comics. Read all these and let me know what you think. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I was like, all right.
I still do that to people.
Yeah. I was like, homework. Perfect.
Yeah.
So, I read those things that you would show me and everything. You have great taste, in storylines.
Thank you very much.
But I guess out of the millions of storylines and things, what's one of, or some of, you don't even have to pinpoint one because I know it's hard. What's one of your kind of favorites that you've seen out there?
Okay. Well, let's live in the ever-present moment of contentious realization for the times we must convey. And where I started taking it was I needed inspiration now for my world that I was contending with. And it's the same one you're contending with, and the listener and everybody else. It's been wild. And I remember using like Grant Morrison's Justice League of America from the 90s while I was in Airman Leadership School in 2008. And I used it as a buffer, like study break from when I would be doing all this Air Force material and needing to find a way to contextualize it in that comic medium. And I used Grant Morrison's JLA to guide me through my own course material to become a sergeant. No kidding. So I had figured out how to use comics to teach myself.
Wow.
I had a buddy use Daredevil comic books to teach me how to read. And I had another buddy do the same thing, and it was you. Daredevil comic books. Guardian Devil. You got me on that joint. That Kevin Smith Guardian Devil.
Oh, yeah. Excellent.
Joe Quesada Guardian Devil. You waxed my mind with that. And you got me reading and critically thinking in a way for the first time in my life during the core time of my development. So I knew how to use comics in my real world, in my real life, to help me get where I needed to be, to do what I needed to do. And so this year, I kind of took a different focus because I realized how outlawed the world was going to go for a while. And yeah, that's a fair statement. It's a outlaw state of affairs right now on multiple points. That's just a generalized statement that can't be helped but known as a truth. It's outlaw out here because a lot of things are changing related to all. Yeah, and it is crazy. So how do you deal with it? And I found the path of the anti-hero was for me. So I started investing the direction of my collection toward, I would find these deals, like insane good deals on books I would randomly find around in East Tennessee. We got all the jockey lots, we got the flea markets, we got the secondhand shops, we got the bargain marts. And a lot of these places are still carrying comics like they did old school. That's how I always found all that cool stuff, because of the like aftermarket and the market of those media display conveyances, like secondhand, like thrift, like vintage. And there's so much of that around here because the material eventually makes it here and people disperse it. So I could always find these cool books that you don't find everywhere anymore. You ain't getting it on Amazon for out of price. You ain't finding it at Barnes and Noble. So hunting comics in Tennessee is like the coolest, because it's still all them old school guys like us that still have the best stuff. And a lot of these companies are having to sell out because of a lot of the things going on in the country right now and in the world. And so all their backstock's going to these bargain models. You can get like a stack of comics from the 90s, the 80s, like the last 10 years for cheap at places like Ollie's. But you can always haggle and cut a deal with your local comic shop guy. Moral of the story is Taskmaster. Everybody's on that Deadpool vibe. They're on that Slade vibe. And these are cool characters. The writers, the movies, the artists, the actors have taken us with these characters as far as they can go. If you're going to start over on a new comic collection after selling it out and getting a like dependent through school and the whole deal to do it, and if you're going to start over again because it's part of your core soul, then go with something you've never read before. Especially if you're dealing with the kind of year like ain't none of us ever had before. Even if we are experienced in the world or novice, it doesn't matter. Ain't nobody had a year like this. So you need material that takes you in a different direction from anywhere you've ever been before. So I got into Taskmaster, and who that is. Okay, you wouldn't have Deadpool without Slade, and you wouldn't have Slade without Deathstroke, because you wouldn't have none of these dudes without George Perez and later Rob Liefeld. So the deal is, Taskmaster's this dude who trains all the like minions of all the other supervillains and three-letter agencies in the Marvel universe. You've got AIM, you've got Hydra, you've got the Hand, you've got all these groups, these societies.
Did Taskmaster come from S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
S.H.I.E.L.D. series.
He was the super secret sleeper. Done download the code. Here was his deal, and this is what made him such a good training instructor, because he did this for S.H.I.E.L.D. too. He did it for everybody. He fought them all, and he worked with them all. But his deal was, anything you can do, I can do better. I can throw it that shield like Captain America. I can sling this arrow like Hawkeye. I can swing these whatever apparatus of weaponry or skill the hero employed. He's a one-man Avenger. He's got all their skills. He's like Mega Man if Mega Man was boss level, because Mega Man gets the powers of all his contestants he defeats. Well, imagine if he got like, to the point where he decided he's the boss. And now Wily's sending all the robots to fight him in his factory. That's what happens when you become someone like Taskmaster, when you know all the heroes, when you've completed a level of your Hero of 1,000 Faces mythological legendary journey that goes back thousands of years, the original comics in Greek, the original ideas in Egypt, the original cultures all over the world with their demigods. These cultures, they bring it all to today, and that's what the comic book is. It's a modern myth legacy. The American experience with the ancients provided, the ancestor prayer, where we take that power. Superman started as a, 100 years ago, the way society was going that mirrors today, cyclical cycles repeating themselves. He was just a common man who had the power to take on all the corruption. And he was the original anti-hero. Superman wasn't as polished. No, he started out more like the Punisher, but not really going like that. He was taking on corruption, and he had the power to do it, and they couldn't stop him. Bullet couldn't stop him. He didn't even have all them flash powers at the time. He just had the peak of a human, what Captain America originally was. That's how Superman started. And the idea was, you can't shoot him and you can't stop him, and he's going to make it better. And that gave a Depression era man, while he was on his lunch break, hope while he was working in his factory, and then getting drafted in the war. And I've known a lot of people that have channeled the power of these characters in their own lives to accomplish more. So when your sports heroes let you down, your actors turn out to be evil, your comic book paper people that are real in the imagination of your own and in how you're perceiving the art get to be the hero that will never let you down because it becomes your own hero within. So Taskmaster's cool for now because George Perez designed him for Marvel to fight the Avengers, Spider-Man, and the rest, and he whipped all their asses. And then he goes and takes the idea to Titans when he's working on that book at DC, and now you got Slade. And then Rob Liefeld had the idea and took it back to Marvel for the X-Men of Deadpool. So if it wasn't for Taskmaster and a shell game between Marvel and DC, you wouldn't have half the Assassin's Guild.
It was like
you kind of got to get on that assassin vibe.
What was that?
Correct. And you need that vibe because with that comes a mystery school of initiation. It ain't always about killing somebody. It's about doing a job low-key like a ninja. The assassin culture started like every other secret warrior culture started. We need a guerrilla special forces dude who's crazy enough to do it. And that's how you get that. And that's why that's the hero for the vibe of this year. Because we're all having to be our own authority now to deal with the outlaw culture we got to contend with until we can get it all squared away and tamed once again. So you got to be a hero, and then you got to be an anti-hero and take it down some of the ones that were supposed to be the good guys.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, that the original heroes in the Westerns wore white hats. Well, he wears a white hood and a white mask trimmed in white and orange and blue because he's trying to bring it all back to order through a chaos vibe. And he's trying to bust everybody's chops and training to do it to get everybody else at his level. So all he's busting all the heroes' asses about is like, it ain't a evil, it ain't a fight, it ain't the money, and it ain't even wanting to like contest them. It's wanting to bring them to a better place of knowing so they can like do a better job and get off whatever vibe is stopping them from fighting for the real truth. That's the character that's influencing me right now.
That's awesome. Going back, I want to touch on something you said a little earlier about the mythology behind comic books, and that is something that is really kind of coming to light now, I believe. Not that it may have not been kind of there already, but I think as they have aged a little bit more, with Stan Lee and his characters and his mythology and Marvel, as well as DC, you start to see a modern day mythology start to take place. And what's funny is you even have like a mythology character in Marvel. You have Thor. He's actually a Norse god, straight up. But you do have, and even that universe, you have the Norse mythology. Was it not Valhalla? Is that right? Or wherever they go, I forget. But you have have that mythology on top of modern day. There's a kid who gets bitten by a spider, and can now jump around and do incredible things. Would be likened to writing back in the day. Back in the ancient days, where they would, talk about Thor or Minotaurs or the Perseus or, any of these gods and goddesses with these powers. And there's something to do with this, I guess, godlike attributes for the human experience that we seem to be lacking, but we like to kind of incorporate into our lives. So the mythology that's there is amazing. This modern day mythology is really the idea of comics now. And people will be looking back, several hundred years from now with these.
Oh, it'll be our stories. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they may even be like Spider-Man religions. People.
There may be, no kidding, because my old man always thought that happened with Elvis once the future seen the old school recordings and how people just flipped out, or the Beatles, the rest of the rock stars. It'd be that way with comics.
Yeah, it was like the Beatles.
They always were.
They had these sounds that put people in trances, that put people in frenzies. Don't listen to the recording of Eleanor Rigby, or you'll fall into a trance. Yeah, man, it could even get there later on, which, as long as history's recorded, I don't think it will. But, if our civilization were to crumble, say it was to get destroyed, nuclear, asteroid, whatever, what the hell ever, and humanity had to rebuild again, and they find all these artifacts and these find some comics laying around somehow miraculously in a bunker, they'd be like, oh, these were ancient stories, and these were people that actually existed, and that kind of thing.
Well, it's a good thing we got superheroes protecting us from crises and secret wars, so that don't happen, John Wayne.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Unfortunately, why would we have a nuclear fallout when these things existed, right? But they're not going to think like that. It's like watching, Ancient Aliens or something now. It's kind of like everything was aliens, and, everything's there, which I do see some truth to some of that stuff, but it can get very fantastical. There may be a Stan Lee that was in that culture back in the day, and he was writing these stories like we write stories today. Because hell, think about how bored you were back then as opposed to now.
Yeah,
they didn't even have internet porn, so what are they gonna do? They gotta make a statue.
Exactly.
Yeah, they gotta do all these things that ancient man, had to do. So to kind of entertain themselves. So the kind of the last great mythology, Stan Lee, and of course highly respected. I do regret that he did live in my time, didn't get to meet him.
Stan Lee, you want to talk about Jack Kirby?
Jack Kirby too, yeah, for sure. No, I know.
Real, Stan was the hype man. Jack Kirby was the show.
Yeah. And I watched The Founder about McDonald's, and it's kind of like that, because you had a guy with an idea, but he didn't sell it. He had the stories and he had the art and the talent, but he didn't, hey, true believers, he wasn't.
Hey, but you want to low key know what was going on there?
Yeah.
That they don't talk about?
Yeah.
All right.
You heard it here, folks.
So, Stan Lee's the hype man. Now, they used to call this the Marvel method. And here's how it worked. You hear about this.
I've heard of this, yeah.
He would jot down the ideas, give them to Jack. Jack would come back with the comics, and then he would script it. He had rough ideas on what he thought the characters should look like and all this. Well, you know what Jack Kirby did? Whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
He went back and just said, oh, I see your idea there. Okay, watch this. Here, try this sometime. Read the comic to yourself in your own captions, in your own dialogue balloons, in your own thought bubbles. And just watch the art and tell yourself your own story.
Mm.
And that's Jack Kirby's the one to do that with. And here's another thing nobody gets. So he got tired of Stan after a while, and they had to move on from one another.
Yeah.
And so he detached and went to DC and did the Fourth World. Well, if you'll read that the same way, you'll realize Fantastic Four and Thor and the Fourth World stuff, he's still telling the same story. Switched up designs. It's all Jack Kirby's story. He proved that with the New Gods epics when he got back from DC, came back to Marvel, and he just kept telling the same story, his own story. He'll tell you the secret of the world if you start from when he got back from World War II, and in 1960 when he started doing the Marvel Comics stuff. If you'll follow that through his DC work and back to Marvel, you will see the secret of the world. And he even did artwork for Lord of Light. Anyway, Lord of Light's a heavy subject, but he did the art for it. Now, all your big comic artists out of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they followed this trend. And what they do is they'd leave DC and go to Marvel, leave Marvel and go to DC. But if you'll follow that artist over the course of their career, when they started with characters they either picked up from someone else or got to design themselves, the writers and the artists are always telling their own story. And you see this in the 90s when they broke and went to Image and did their own thing. And they're still telling the same stories with their versions of the characters. It's all about what artist and writer you want to follow and what story they're telling, because they'll tell the same one over 5 different series of disconnected characters, but it's all the same thing. If you'll just fucking read your own, you'll see it if you detach to look at it.
It's like what the art's saying as opposed to what the words are saying. Is that what you mean?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Correct. Yeah. Correct.
It's like they draw the story, no matter what the words are talking about. You can read it and it shows the same thing, sort of, or a continuation
you can
of that
make
art.
That. Yeah, you can make that whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And tenets and dogma. You don't have to keep up with continuity. You don't have to know what happened last issue or what's coming the next one. You could have like 5 comics that have nothing to do with each other, telling yourself your own story, interconnected.
Wow.
Every one of them. If you want to rethink that critically about the way you engage this media without just giving in to what someone else wanted you to say or hear or know.
Yeah. So Jack Kirby could have had a whole different intent on a story that he was drawing that Stan Lee actually
yes, sir.
And was like, hey, this is what's actually going on. This is the names of the characters. This is, what's actually happening.
Yeah, he's a manager at best. He's an art director and a manager at best. But your leader in the situation is your artist. That's why go read a novel if you want to sit there and read exposition and justification.
Yeah.
A comic's about the art.
Yeah.
And that right there, that statement's coming from someone that considers himself a writer as opposed to an artist.
Yeah.
And even I know it's not about what Stan Lee, he was cool. He was a hype man. But and let's respect him and all that, but you can't talk about Stan without talking about Jack, just like you can't talk about the Avenger without talking about Power Man.
Yeah. Shout out. So
Power Man's the real story.
Yeah. Well, just because I wrote it and you had the art though, so you could write your own story there. But what I saw from your interpretation, we did the same thing. I kind of interpreted what you put down on paper, and my imagination went to where it went. So
and that's where it was supposed to go. It didn't matter what you gave me back; it was going to be the soul of the story.
Yeah.
I didn't care what I thought. I wanted who you were to come through, and it did always.
Yeah. Well, it was, man. And going back to Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, another example I was trying to kind of hit on it, but you had McDonald's. McDonald's was a franchise back in California, and these guys created a system of fast food. And the system was faster than everything. I mean, that's where we get the term fast food from, is because they created this thing called a speedy system. And they were able to deliver hamburgers quicker and cheaper and more volume faster, right? So this guy named Ray Kroc, which is funny, crock of shit, right? But this guy named Ray Kroc went down to California, and he was just trying to sell stuff to fast food restaurants. And he would go through 1 million drive-throughs a day, and he'd get this shitty service. And he found them, McDonald's, and he became the ultimate hype man for McDonald's. And these guys are just like, yeah, what the fuck ever. we're sitting around, we have our store, we've tried to franchise, and he's like, look, man, give it to me and I will take it, and he took it, and now McDonald's is what it is because they had that ultimate hype man person. So who's the real hero? That is a debate. Who is the real hero? If McDonald's didn't allow this guy to do what he did, then it wouldn't be as big as it is. And Jack Kirby, same way. And it could be the difference in personalities there. You have a difference. Yeah. I'm just doing my art, man.
Right. Right. Exactly.
They don't care about the business side. They don't care about the hype or the story per se. They care about drawing these things on a panel, right? And
exactly.
And that's what their deal was. And I think that's why I know there may have been a little bad blood there at one time with Kirby and Stan Lee, but I think that's how they understood each other.
They settled it in blood too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the last time they saw each other.
How did that get settled? What was the
they randomly ran into each other at a party years later after he had done his work for DC. And they kind of shocked one another running into one another. And Stan Lee had just cut his hand on like a glass that he'd dropped or something, and it was bleeding everywhere. And he lifted his hand up, not even concerned about the blood, to shake Jack Kirby's hand and acknowledge him like you and me hadn't seen each other in 20 years or something. And that's after that happened, after he shook his hand in his own blood, he came back to Marvel.
Oh, wow.
That's how Stan Lee got Jack Kirby back, was he shook his hand at a party in his own blood.
Well,
talked to him like he missed him like a brother.
Yeah.
And that's what got him to come back.
Didn't know that story. And, business can get in the way of the art, every time, and that's kind of the difference between art and business. Is there's a very fine line, because people want to make a living doing their art. And also they want to be kind of not hindered to do their art. So there's a fine line between what the audience wants, or what you think the audience want, and what you want to kind of create and throw out there, kind of business versus art. And, that's one of the struggles, I believe, of people now with creative ventures, is they have to put food on the table, and starving artists has been a damn term for years and years and years, right? So artists have to starve, it's like a rite of passage. It's like you have to sleep in your damn car for, a few months before you're noticed on America's Got Talent, and you can
That's why it has to be a devotion.
Why? Why does it have to be like that? Why do you have to?
Because it's got to be a devotion.
What's that?
Because it has to be a devotion.
You have to be devoted to your art. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. Like people have to see that you're the real deal, or something. But it's still kind of messed up, because the world needs artists, and we need to pay attention to the artists of the world.
Well, you know why the artists for Conan created such a volume of work for that character 100 years ago, when it was pulp magazines?
Conan the Barbarian?
Conan the Barbarian started 100 years ago in pulp magazines.
Oh, it's been that long?
The precursor to comic books was your pulp magazines. That's where they get the term pulp fiction from.
Gotcha.
So one of your original adventure characters in your like early 20th century pulp fiction dime novels, they would sell in places before they come up with comic books. Conan. They made so many dime novels about Conan, and the writer, I forget his name. You'll have to look it up and post notes. But
Ernest Hemingway, not really.
Yeah, right. No. So the creator of Conan, you know why he put out so much material? I'll tell you. Dude was suspected to have had mental health advisements that were not properly treated or diagnosed because that don't exist yet literally as a science. It's being experimented as a medicine at best in Europe then, but it's still just a charm at parties to discuss by 1920s America, while they're also discussing all these new political ideas that are coming out that end up creating the circumstances for war, or that led to the war to begin with. But the original artist for Conan and writer, he's writing all these stories because he literally believes Conan the Cimmerian is standing behind him at his table with a sword at his neck, and if he don't write his exploits, he's going to drive that sword through and kill him.
Wow, no, really?
And the Conan story stopped only because later in life, after a career of Conan stories that were highly successful, everyone loved them. They were all adapted into comic books later. Up until this day, everybody loved the exploits of Conan, and the only reason they stopped making them back then was the writer had to blow his brains out. He couldn't deal with it anymore.
Wow. Crazy, man.
Because that's the only reason Conan stopped, because the writer's like, just do it. I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it. Just do it, Conan. And Conan did it.
Oh. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's why you don't write Conan, because Conan's sword will be at your neck. If you can deal with it, he'll take you places.
Wow.
That's the deal. So now we get into the metaphysics.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only reason he put all that material out was because Conan was going to kill him if he didn't.
Wow.
And he took himself out to quit dealing with it.
So he was literally having apparition delusions, schizophrenic probably, of a...
Sure, before that was even real or known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Exactly. So, and there's no heavy metal at that time. Jazz just started, so there's no heavy metal to compartmentalize the fact that Conan threatening to kill you every day if you don't write it, sell it, and publish it is actually the most metal thing anything could ever happen. Like, you're gonna be haunted by the ghost of another dimension or visited by an alien or an angel. Like, Conan with a sword on your neck telling you to write this and I'll get you laid. That's got to be the most metal thing that ever happened. Like, why did he give in to that? I'd have been over here like, yes, sir. What are we writing today?
It wonders why Mormonism was a thing instead of that,
Right, exactly. Yeah. Why couldn't Conan have come upon one of them dudes back in the day?
Yeah.
We'd have such a metal culture by now. Oh, yeah. God.
Yeah, I would be down for the Conan church, first church of Conan.
See, a Lord of the Rings world or a Harry Potter world or a comic book world brought to life like that today, like if that apparition came upon a writer today and said, this is what must happen, the writer would be like, metal! Because they've got the context for those being a thing. Just like they would also know they had a mental illness and needed to treat for it. You couldn't do that then.
They wouldn't come upon
That's why you call it,
because they would medicate for it, and you wouldn't have the story.
Right, that's exactly.
Yeah, you wouldn't have the story at all. The person would already be on some kind of antipsychotic from
exactly. So but at the same time, because you don't know anything going on, now you get to be a pioneer. Because that's what we are right now, too, 100 years later in a cycle. Because we're about to change society. Everything's going to be so different. But the whole idea of a new normal is a submission. And submission is not what you want. It's a subordination is your freedom. Subordination is what you want. You can submit to Conan and blow your brains out because it's too much. Or you can subordinate to Conan and just ride with him and see where he takes you. And then he'll eventually put the sword down and say, dude, I've always had you and I was never going to do this. Like the Dread Pirate Roberts from Princess Bride. Oh, Wesley chasing Buttercup. Yeah, we can bring anything you want into this, bud.
Yeah. No, dude, that is something I've never heard before in my life about Conan. So that is a revelation to me. No clue it was like a psychotic thing that he was doing.
Yeah.
Man,
don't get me started on Wonder Woman and what that was really about.
Yeah.
Oh.
The lasso of truth, eh?
the lie detector test, the dude was involved in the research for that, created Wonder Woman with his wife and their lover, another lady. And he had kids with both of them. He was with both of them. They were both with each other. They were both with him. It was like a three-way all the time. And they had a family. And when the old man passed at the end of his life, the women just kept the family going, married, stayed together, and built the successes off the royalties of the Wonder Woman they designed in the 40s.
Wow. So Wonder Woman basically came out of a polyamorous relationship.
Correct. One of the first successful polyamorous relationships.
Wow.
Exactly.
Go see 1984.
I want to.
It's going to come out at some point, I think. They've been putting it back because of that, but interesting backstory.
All comics are about his power.
Yeah, you don't hear these human experiences through these stories, but what's funny, and I'm going to take it to this level, is Conan would be considered an inspirational type writing. Somebody visited him. Going back to kind of Joseph Smith, he saw an angel, and the verbiage and the language that is used here for angel and God and this and that and the other thing is different than barbarian and this and other things. But we're using these imageries and these things that we're seeing or not seeing to actually go into this. And even I believe even with some delusions, there's a smidgen of truth in some of that. And
I know there is. I have episodes all the time.
Yeah. So, there's not only, I don't know how to put this, but mental illness, I grew up, and I'm going to get into this actually in some podcasts coming up, is I actually grew up, my mom is a schizophrenic, so she actually does have these delusions. Most of them are people are out to get her. That's kind of the worst of it, that things that happen that way. But some of these things, and if you study mental illness back throughout history, you see a lot of these shaman or medicine men and things like this, like the people who had kind of a different plane of existence here.
Yeah, that's the vibe I'm going for.
It's better than just thinking you're crazy, right?
Because I got papers. I suffer from combat PTSD. I've been diagnosed and rated for disability related to like behavioral, all this stuff. But that's official. Like that's documented. It don't stop me from working or functioning in the world. So you learn where to take that language for yourself.
Yeah.
Because you have a health problem. And so you end up turning it into a strength if you know how to compartmentalize the pain to lovingly communicate through it, so you can then weaponize the paranoia and overcome fear. Like a Green Lantern ring. Then you still read comics.
The best case scenario,
with the right development.
Yeah.
With the right development.
Yeah, it doesn't always get there, but it's with the right community around you, with the right care, it can be a very positive thing. And I think some of the more intense stories or things that we may have, encountered came, maybe out of some of these delusions and out of some of these things that most people would say is a mental health issue or a problem.
Or is it really? If you just repack and unpack the language to reinterpret, I always thought your mother was a genius and she was brilliant.
Yeah.
And every interaction I had with her, I always left like calmed out and just, I love your mother and I love hanging out with her.
She's one of the most calming and loving people, at her best. If she's in her world, then it is more like frightening and scary, because
you're in her world.
Thinks things are real that aren't, and it's a Conan to her throat.
Hey.
It is something like that. But she hasn't really wrote any novels about it, but it's definitely can be used as a strength or a I guess a vision into another place, and
It
going
all
back
depends on your devotion.
the shaman, like they were probably just people with some kind of seer or mental illness, that they wouldn't call in the tribe. They wouldn't call it mental illness. They would just call it like they're on a different plane. They're seeing that's we don't see. So like let's put
and now they're counseling everybody.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a different way of seeing the world. That sometimes
you know why mental health that articulates these things as illness is like nonsense anyway? Because Freud, the dude that come up with all this, was just trading cocaine and sex for treatment. And that was his diagnosis. And that's real if you really want to know. Yeah. And so if that's how it started, how seriously should we really take what they say now?
Yeah. Do cocaine and have sex about it. You'll be good. Like, yeah.
And that was it. That's your 100 years ago psychology lesson. Well, what do you do with that now? Well, you break down the value and validity of the mental health industry, because it doesn't have valid points if it started is something that, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with those activities for consent and people that enjoy doing that together, and you turn it into a profession, then turn it into outlaw. Figure out your moral compass before you come back and judge somebody with like anything going on. And that stigma is what we got to get society away from. So 22 vets a day stop charging themselves for the game. Because if they think they're a shaman and they get empowered, then that's like beautiful. But if they think they're just jacked up in the head, they're going to pull the trigger like Conan's old man.
Yeah. Right. And, they begin to think it's a problem with them. So why do they have to exist in the world? Like, why do I have to keep going in this world? Because I have no function. I have no, I'm an outcast, I'm an outcast of society. Nobody needs me, nobody loves me, or, and that pain gets to you. And then,
well, it turns into belligerence, and then you start acting like a jackass to your friends, and now you're accountable for things you shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
Until you can find a way to make peace with yourself and charge the inner power to take it in a more positive direction.
Yeah. And people can take mental illness, and really use it as a scapegoat, as well. It's like drinking, it really is. It's like you get drunk and you piss all over the bar and you make a scene inside of a bar. And then the next day it was like, oh, I was just drunk, like, yes, you were.
Oh, we're still accountable for that. I'm accountable for throwing beer on my buddy when I'm drunk.
Exactly. So
you're not getting invited to the party anymore. That's just it. You're done. Yeah. Now you got to self-realize and stop being so aggressive.
There are consequences to it. Yeah.
There are consequences that you do have to deal with that are valid, that there's no quarter given. You're not getting forgiven. That's not real. What you got to do is work on making yourself somebody that you can deal with, let alone anyone else.
Absolutely. And, exactly. Your mental health is something that you're accountable for yourself, but what's funny is, a lot of the times the kind of the catch-22 is mental health is something sometimes that you're yourself not aware of. Like you have a problem.
Oh yeah.
Has to be spotted by somebody else and like, dude, look, that's anxiety. That's depression. Look, you're depressed. Yeah. You need to talk to somebody. You need some help or whatever. So, a lot of the times that we think that we're normal when we could actually have a better kind of view or a better turn on life if we just, got a little help, whether it be medication or counseling or, whatever it is.
And you'll get told this is a cop out, but sometimes you don't trust the authorities enough. But that is a cop out, and you have to accept that. Well, they're right, but if they only understood your context, So if you're trying to convince somebody to get help, really help them get the doctor you think they need, or it doesn't matter if they think it's a cop out or not. you're still going to keep doing what you think you need to do over trust.
Yeah, yeah. If a delusion is real, you're not going to convince. Well, if a delusion is real to a person, you're not going to convince that person that it's not. Like, you couldn't convince the Conan guy that Conan wasn't there. You know, like, he is really there. He's got a fucking sword to my throat, and he's going to kill me. You know, that is something you couldn't be like, yeah, man, no, you're just seeing things, bro. Like, you know, you're crazy, you're out of your head. I mean, you could say that all day, but this guy really believed that that thing was there. And, you know, that requires another level of health that, you know, somebody just saying, look, man, you're seeing shit is not going to, like, help that guy. So.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's up to, and conspiracy theorists and all that kind of stuff, you know, it's there, but it is up to, I guess, a consensus of people to look and see that this is what reality is now. Like, it's not what this person says or what that person says, what media outlets coming at this and that, but it's really a consensus of community. And what's really cool is we're living in a time where we can actually hold a lot of people accountable. Now, there may be people kind of forces or whatever, you know, people are talking about deep state and all that kind of stuff. There may be forces behind controlling social media, but we live in a time where we have Twitter, we have Facebook, everybody has a camera on their phone, you know, and truth can be buried, but it can't be hidden forever because, you know, you have people who know what happened. You have people who
also film anything out of context and say it's whatever you want it to mean.
That too. So that's where we have a problem with truth. We have a big problem with truth in our society, and that's why a lot of people are succumbing more to conspiracy theories being real, which I'm not saying all of them are not. Some of them make a lot of sense, but I'm not a huge conspiracy theorist. I'm just an open-minded person. So there's a difference, you know, there's a difference between somebody who thinks on all different levels and are like, you know, if you take this piece and this piece and connect them, it looks like a picture of a puzzle. That puzzle is not always, in the correct box, but you know, you have different things that you can kind of tie together, and it's like, well, that makes sense. But at the same time, you know, the level of truth that is being, you know, distorted is the real problem in, you know, what really is happening, what really is going on, and what narrative is a person following. And my answer to everything is, don't believe everything and form your own opinions, form your own thoughts. And, you know, you can't read everything, or you can't believe everything you read on the internet or anything like that, kind of a, you know, stereotypical statement. But, you know, you can't believe everything you see with your two eyes sometimes, you know.
I couldn't agree with you more. Everything you're saying right now, it's on point. That's how it is. It really is. If y'all want to see it clear, you know.
Yeah. You're labeled a conspiracy theorist just because you're thinking intelligently about something, you know, and
critically too,
and critically thinking. And we have such a downplay of critical thinking in America.
We've got a critical thinking deficit.
You know, absolutely. And you know, if you can't look at an issue and you're just like, if you look at an issue and you're just like, yep, that's how it is, you know, or if you look at an issue and be like, that's bullshit, you know, most of the time it's somewhere in the middle. Like, it's usually not 100% bullshit, and it's usually not 100% truth. It's somewhere right there in the middle where, you know, where the rubber meets the road.
Oh yeah. Right on.
Power to the people. I don't know.
No, or something that makes sense for now.
Yeah, yeah.
Power from within.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, 2020, you know, we've been going through it with the virus, coronavirus and everything. But honestly, Thomas, I'll go ahead and tell you, 2020 has been pretty okay for me because
it's been an outstanding year for me. I've had the time of my life.
I've gotten to spend a lot of time with myself. You know, I've gotten to, you know, I've gotten to really rest and heal and things that I haven't been able to do in years because I've been worried about, you know, making a living and sustaining. This year I've been pretty blessed, you know, so I'm really taking a lot of time to chill and just think about things. And like, that's something I haven't been able to do since I was a teenager, you know, so
exactly.
I'm living it up. You know, 2020. Okay, let's have a.
I am too, dude.
Not Big with time. The deaths, not with the coronavirus, and not with all that. I'd rather have this without all the massive death and panic.
And that's what you're supposed to do with.
Yeah. You there? Did I lose you? Hey, did I lose you?
Hey, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hey. Can you hear me? Yellow.
Hey, you there?
Yo. You good?
You got disconnected there.
Yeah, my connection's good, man. May have been you there, but it's fine. No problem. No worries. I can cut out the lulls.
Radio check, B-Flow.
Hey, 10-4, X1, 7, 3, 4, 7. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no problem, man. I can cut that out. No problem. No problem. One thing, so just kind of going back, great stuff, by the way. But I just wanted to like kind of go back real quick to the comic book thing, kind of culture. I was thinking about this earlier about girls and comics and cosplay. I was thinking that's probably like the ultimate like geekdom thing. It came from like not being cool to like cool. And a lot of these people, and I don't want to criticize because I don't know everybody, and I can't like just be like, you know, everybody is a fake, you know, posers. But like Instagram cosplay has become something that's like really big, right? So are they doing this for likes and to be cool, or for the culture of it and to be like actually devoted to that like storyline, like to that character? It's like they just think that character's cute or hot, you know, or is it actually a devotion? So I was kind of thinking about that earlier when it comes to like cosplayers. But you know, I can't judge everybody. I don't want to put that on that level.
I would definitely consider it a devotion for a couple different reasons. That is just as in it to win it, totally committed as what we do with ours.
That's
And
true.
I'll articulate it like this, especially for a lot of the women who are into comics and the characters and the movies. It's not the world that it was in any decade beforehand anymore, for one. All these things and the way their power takes hold on us has everything to do with the context of our growth in our time. The reason the comics I still read have to do with where they go has everything to do with that's what I like for my development. And what these ladies who got involved with the industry saw wasn't all the tenets and dogma and nonsense of continuity. They don't care about any of that. And why should they? It doesn't matter. You're talking about people that know how to dress and style and design, and that is just as much what comics are about. And so they charge their power by expressing through their own artistic way their version of a character. And it's no less a devotion, it's no less in it to win it, totally committed, is what we do with what we like to do about it. And that's what we were going to get when the ladies we adored started adoring what we enjoy with us, is we were going to get it expressed their way. And would you really want it anywhere different? I mean, honestly, if I'm going to read comics with a girlfriend, do I want her sitting here having this conversation with me, or do I want her sitting here showing me what she's got as far as her style ideas for her costumes and helping her put it together? And really, when it gets tactically involved, I think this is a great conversation for us bros to have. And if I'm going to express this interest with a lady friend, I want to help her with her costume, because that's going to be just as much fun. If you're in a committed partner relationship with one of these kind of people,
I was just trying to criticize something, so I really like the point of view that you put there on it. Well, yeah, I was really just being hypercritical there.
I would rather them devote their way, and it's there for us to enjoy and prize upon them, because that's how they were going to devote. And what lady have you ever known in your life that's into something you're into that does it your way too? Well, that ain't what you want anyway. It's got to be something that like feeds. It's got to be a vibe. It's got to be a playoff. You're already doing it your way. You don't need her to do it your way. You need to enjoy her doing it her way. And then
like Burger King,
way all of its own.
Have it your way.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it should be. If she wants to make Captain Marvel into Wonder Woman's like dream costume idea, go nuts. We'll Marvel and DC it up and be nice and like sacrilegious as far as geekdom culture is concerned. Be an outlaw in this culture. We need outlaws in this culture, because the culture is outlaw for one, and it's become too much religion, too much criticism. You got to bring it back to love, and whatever way to get love than a nice lady dressed in her favorite character to make you feel cool about it.
Love and peace, bro.
That's the ultimate devotion from the geekdom girls, women in our lives, is them showing us they can bring to life in a reality these ideas you think are cool on paper, and thus making it better, because it's that version of your favorite character and theirs, but her version of who that is. And that's the coolest comic book nobody ever published.
Boom. Boom.
You like that?
Here first. B-Flow Show.
You see, you got to have some romance about your life if you're going to love it. Without romance, there is no love. Without devotion, desire is meaningless.
Si, senor. I love it. Yeah, man. So there you go, a spin on a criticism, taken back to love. Really good, man. Just kind of close it out. I know we've been talking. We can talk forever. We can talk probably hours.
Well, I got a lady waiting on me for dinner here directly, so it'll be a good time to close it out. I think I've said what I needed to say.
With that, and hopefully, she puts on a Psylocke outfit for you. But
Well, she's Psylocke her soul, dangerous woman with a sword. So that's enough for me. She's outfitted enough in who she is and what she needs, wants out of this world. She's already Psylocke in my mind.
very nice. Just quick question to close it out. Your favorite series as a kid growing up as now, do you have a defining comic or series that you would, I guess it's one of those desert island questions. You know, you're dropped in the middle of the desert island. You can only have one comic series to read for the rest of your time, or duration until you're rescued. What would it be and why?
Chris Claremont's 17-year run on Uncanny X-Men. The inventory of Chris Claremont's X-Men work in its entirety is what I'll take from that 17-year period he worked on that series, because it's the best and it's so layered to come back to, and it's just where it's at. Chris Claremont's Uncanny X-Men is what I'm reading.
What are some of the real quick? What are some of the storylines there? Was that when Wolverine lost his adamantium?
No, this is way before that. This is the
Before
80s when it's Phoenix Saga and Days of Future Past, and
cool.
But those aren't even the best stories, honestly. Those are the famous stories, but they're not the best. Because the best one is Nightcrawler and Wolverine sitting in a bar, taking Colossus to school, who's about to have his ass handed to him by Juggernaut, and they're not going to help him. And they're just going to let him fight it out. And they're all in civvies, too. This is a John Romita Jr. art from the 80s, like X-Men 180-something. But it's Juggernaut, and Colossus fighting in a bar, and Wolverine and Nightcrawler just sitting there watching him and drinking. And the moral of the story is, don't you break Kitty's heart again, Peter. It's a couple of older bros taking the young guy out who's just playing with this girl's feelings and don't know what's up. So they take him out to bust his ass to show him, if you're going to love her, love her. This ain't desire, it's devotion. You're going to love this woman or you're going to leave her alone, because we'll love her as friends better than you'll love her in the ways you're playing around, son. And so they like K. Marco the Juggernaut and just hand it to him. And then he's sitting there and he's like, learn something, because that's what bros do. We bust one another out so we can bring the best accountabilities forward, so we can best take care in devotion versus and the desire to the true love versus the critics, all of it. You take Colossus to the bar, you get him drunk, you get his ass whipped by the toughest dude that's tougher than him, and you teach him a lesson about breaking a young girl's heart, and you teach him you're going to love her even better going forward. That's why that one's the best.
Very nice. I appreciate that, Thomas. Appreciate you coming on the show, man. And of course, I'm going to have you back. I kind of want to have you back and talk about some military stuff. Kind of go into that.
Right on. I would love that, brother.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is kind of like background with kind of some stuff like comics and stuff. We definitely share that, obviously. But yeah, I kind of want to get into some more issues and topics with you. And, love you. 100%.
Love you, brother.
Brothers,
my cousin, my man, my superhero twin flame.
Another mother from another brother. I don't know how that goes.
Yeah,
but
it doesn't matter.
Good luck with
each other.
Good luck with your date, man, and I will talk to you probably sooner rather than later.
I love you, Brandon.
Love you too, man.
Thank you for this. This was a blessing.
Of course.
All day long.
It's
It's
about
been
time,
great.
right?
Like it always was.
I love the format too, right? So you got Zoom.
Oh yeah, it's great.
All right, brother.
Hey, stay safe. Wear a mask. Be an outlaw. Oh,
hey.
take care. Hey.
Later, brother.
Later.